In this section, we're going to talk about proof of work. This is going to be the most technical section of this whole course, where we're going to explain how does proof of work and how does it solve what it was the Byzantine generals problem. So the overall problem is that we have a couple of options. We have a couple of either transactions or a couple of directives, and we don't know which to go with. And we're dealing with now a distributed network. And Satoshi said the solution to this is proof of work. Satoshi did not invent proof of work. It actually had existed prior to 2008 with regard to email spam prevention. But Satoshi was the one that sort of came up with the idea that it can be applied for a distributed network so we can avoid the Byzantine generals problem, or as we described, the double spend problem. And the idea is that we need to have some mechanism where there can be someone in the whole group, in the whole network, that gets to pick which of these two options to go with. You know, in the case of the generals, we had said there's a 4 o'clock time to attack or a 5 o'clock time. In the double spend problem, we have two different options, whether we can honor a transaction that Tom is sending Mike a payment or Tom is sending Lisa a payment. So we have a couple of options to go with. Proof of work requires the whole network, everyone all the participants, and we're going to call them miners because that's how they're referred to in a proof of work blockchain. All these miners, in order to be the one to decide which to go with, they have to complete some amount of work ahead of everyone else. In terms of what is the actual work that they're doing, so in Bitcoin and in a blockchain network, what they're doing is this thing known as a cryptographic hash function, or a hash function for short. It's a pretty simple mathematical operation. A hash function could take any kind of input. It could be as small as you want. It could be a single letter. It can be all of Wikipedia. And you put it through this mathematical funnel, or this mathematical transformation, and it spits out a single number. This number represents the input in the sense that if you were to rerun that input again through the hash function, you'll get the same number as an output. And also, you will never be able to find two different inputs that will give you that same output. Another very important property about a hash function is that there's no way to reverse engineer or to guess what the input is once you see the output. So if you see the output alone, you would not know anything about the input. You won't know how long it is. You won't know if it's a number that you fed in or versus text or even number or odd number. It's completely opaque in terms of how it generates such a number. And we'll see later why that's important. In the blockchain network, what is happening is all the participants in the network, which are called miners, they are trying to take a lot of different information, a lot of transactions that they've heard over the course of some number of minutes. And they've heard about all these transactions, which can just be different instructions about who to sending currency or digital currency to another participant. It could be instructions in terms of deploying some kind of rules or code to the network. They take all these transactions and they try to create a block out of them. A block is just simply a batch or a collection of these transactions. So they take these transactions. They also take it along with some dummy number, some random number along with it, and they feed all of that through the hash function. And we require that the resulting hash number is a relatively low number, meaning we have like some target number, and whatever the resulting hash, it needs to come in below that number. And the number is so low that it's very hard to do. Like probabilistically, you will not get a low enough hash. So what you would have to do is rerun that hash operation again, but this time just change that dummy number slightly. So that dummy number actually has a special name. It's called a nonce, or a nonsense number. So you take all the transactions with the nonce, feed it through that hash function, hoping to get the right or a low value output. And you can only do this by brute forcing it, by trying many different possibilities. And in fact, the Bitcoin network as a whole does something like 50 billion hashes per second. So every second, that's what the whole network is doing. And they're doing this because they're hoping that at least one of these participants or miners will find or get lucky to get a resulting hash that is low enough. If that miner achieves it before everyone else, they get the right to now publish that block or release that block to the rest of the network. So the rest of the network would now get that block, and they will see that, yeah, indeed, it does have a low hash output. Everything within the block is valid. All those transactions are legitimate, and they will then accept whatever was contained in that block. Now, the important thing is, now this is how the Byzantine generals problem is solved, is because the miner gets to choose which valid transactions to include. So if there are two possible options, we don't know to go with option A or transaction A or transaction B, that either of those are valid, but we can't honor both. The miner will just pick one, put that in the block. If it's lucky enough, it gets the right output hash, it will then take that block, publish it out, or send it out to everyone else, and everyone else will then go along with it. Whatever was in that block, they'll see like this is the miner that actually figured it out first. So we're going to accept that block, and they will add it to their copy of the blockchain. Also note that each block has a reference to the previous block. So it actually includes a number, and in fact, it's the hash of the previous block, and includes that within its block. And that's how all these blocks are chained together, hence the name blockchain. And then this cycle repeats. Then all the miners would try to work on creating the next block and take other transactions that they've heard before that have not yet been included in any block so far, and try to make a block that they can publish to the rest of the network. So that's how we get around this double spend problem, or the Byzantine generals problem. There is one element that I kind of glossed over, and that is, I did say that only one block will get created within some period of time, right? So they're all in a race to create a new block. And in fact, in the Bitcoin network, on average, a new block is created every 10 minutes. However, it is still possible by, probabilistically, occasionally it will happen that two blocks are created more or less at the same time, meaning that you could have some miner that creates block number 11A, and then some other miner creates block number 11B. They're both valid blocks. They're both slightly different. They both follow from block 10. And now we have these two options out there that are floating around the network. And it might seem like now, oh, we're back in the same issue. Like, what do we go with, 11A or 11B? And the answer is that it's not really a problem, because what happens is you can go with either one. So some of the network may choose to go with block 11A, the rest go with 11B, and then whichever you decide on, those miners will now try to construct the next block off of that version that they had accepted. So part of the network will try to make block 12A, and the rest will try to make 12B. Now, one of those two blocks will likely be created first. Just statistically speaking, either 12A or 12B will win out. And say if 12A gets created first, 12A gets published to the rest of the network. Everyone else who's even working on the B side will be like, hey, wait a second, there's block 12 out there that is on a slightly different version of the chain that I have. So they would all switch over to the A side. They will drop any kind of B version blocks that they have and go to the A side. So it is possible for a short period of time that there are two different recent histories in what had happened in the blockchain, but over, after say 20, 30, or 60 minutes, then anything that happened further in the past is agreed upon by everyone in the entire network. So just as a recap, a blockchain is solving the Byzantine generals problem by using the idea of proof of work, and the work is just doing these hash functions repeatedly again and again and again, so that we can, as a mechanism, to have one participant or one miner sort of be the decision maker in creating a new block. And that's how the blockchain is constructed over time.